Deputy Prime.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been asked to reply on behalf of my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister. As the House will know, he's been at the UN General Assembly in New York, where he's held meetings with world leaders, in particular leaders from countries vulnerable to climate change. He's also met with President Biden for discussions on climate, COVID and international security.
Robert Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. GPs have done a brilliant job delivering the vaccination programme. They've had to work very long hours in the most challenging circumstances, and now they're having to deal with a huge COVID backlog. As a result, many of my constituents have contacted me, frustrated by how difficult it is to see their GP face-to-face. Just this week, I've been contacted by someone who's been diagnosed with cancer after being taken into hospital. Now, she said to me, and I quote, "I can't help but wonder if they'd have caught it sooner, if I'd been able to see someone in person instead of trying to describe my symptoms over the phone." So can I ask the Deputy Prime Minister what the government are doing to tackle the COVID backlog and get face-to-face GP appointments back as soon as possible?
Can I thank my honourable friend? I know he's a huge champion of his local NHS. I know of the incredible work that he's done on reinstatement of breast cancer screening clinics, amongst other things. Can I join with him in thanking GPs for the heroic job they've done to see us through the pandemic? While appointment numbers have returned to pre-pandemic levels, of course, patients, the public, rightly expect to see their GP face-to-face where it's necessary, and as he'll be aware, we've provided, and the Chancellor has funded, a £36 billion package to deal with the NHS backlog, as well as pursuing our plan for social care.
We now come to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the honourable member makes a very important point that I think across the House people are concerned about that. And I share the Deputy Leader's comments regarding the work of the GPs and our local primary care services. But, Mr. Speaker, can I begin by offering my commiserations to the Prime Minister after he flew away to the US and made absolutely zero progress on the trade deal that he promised us. And can I ask the Deputy Prime Minister, does the Deputy Prime Minister still believe that British workers are amongst the worst idlers in the world?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, can I just say to the Right Honourable Lady, for a start, I think it's excellent news that because of the engagement we've had with the US, they have immediately given us the boost to trade and businesses by reinstating travel from the UK to the US. When it comes to British workers, can I just say to her that we've got payroll employment back to levels we saw before the pandemic. We've got youth employment rising. We've got businesses advertising over 1 million jobs at a record high, and the fastest economic growth in the G7 this year.
Angela Rayner.
Oh, Mr. Speaker, still no trade deal. And those were the words, of the Deputy Prime Minister in his book, which he wrote alongside the Foreign Secretary, the Home Secretary and the Business Secretary. And his actions, Mr. Speaker, speak even louder than those words, because whatever they say, their political choices have made it harder for working families to get by. So can the Deputy Prime Minister tell us how much his universal credit cut and national insurance hike will take from a worker on £18,000 a year, say a shop worker or a travel agent?
Well, what I'd say to the Right Honourable Lady is that the UC uplift was always meant to be temporary. We've paid the wages of nearly 12 million workers through this pandemic. We are coming out with rising jobs, rising wages. We would have done none of that if we'd have taken her advice, not come out of lockdown. Labour have got no plan. Our plan is working.
Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, lots of words for I don't know, so let me help him. His government chose to cut the income of a worker on £18,000 a year by over £1,100. And Mr. Speaker, that's almost exactly the same as an average annual energy bill. Just as energy prices are ballooning, they've chosen to take the money that could cover a year's worth of bills out of the pockets of working people. The Deputy Prime Minister has said the solution is for people to work harder. So can he tell us how many days a worker on the minimum wage would have to work this year in order to afford a night at a luxury hotel, say in Crete?
If she wants to talk about taxes and easing the burden on the lowest paid, I'd remind her, whenever a Labour Party has gone into government, the economy has nosedived, unemployment has soared, and taxes have gone through the roof. Under this government, we cut income tax, saving every worker £1,200 each year. We've introduced and extended the national living wage, so full-time workers £4,000 better off each year. We've doubled the free childcare for working parents, worth up to £5,000 for every child every year. When Labour takes office, unemployment goes up and the economy goes down.
Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, he talks about the economy. He doesn't even know how much his own holiday costs. So let me tell him, a worker on the minimum wage would need to work an extra 50 days to pay for a single night at his favourite resort. Probably, Mr. Speaker, even more if the sea was open. The very same week that the government is cutting universal credit, working people face soaring energy bills. The Prime Minister has said it's just a short-term problem and we'll leave it to the market to fix. So can the Deputy Prime Minister guarantee that no one will lose their gas or energy supply or be pushed into fuel poverty this winter?
Well, the Business Secretary has made very clear that energy supplies will continue, that our #1 priority is to protect consumers. I just remind her, though, of her words. It was in The Guardian in the 11th of May, so it must be true. She said the Labour Party must stop talking down to people. Working class people don't want a handout, they want opportunities. They're getting those opportunities. Mr. Speaker, they're getting those opportunities under a Conservative government, with catch-up tutoring for over 2 million children this academic year, hundreds of thousands of jobs for young people under our Kickstart scheme, and helping over 1 million people on long-term unemployment out under the Restart scheme. She's right. Labour talks down to working people. Under the Conservatives, they get to rise up and fulfil their potential.
Angela Rayner.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I notice we have a shortage of hot air this week. But just as the Prime Minister isn't here, but the Deputy Prime Minister is doing his best to shore up supplies. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? He talks about opportunities. The government have axed the Green Homes Grant, scrapped the zero carbon home standard, and lost the storage facility that held 3/4 of our gas. Their failures, Mr. Speaker, paved the way for this crisis that will hit families and businesses. And as usual, it will be the British people that will have to pay the price. So can the Deputy Prime Minister guarantee that none of the workers employed by the energy companies will end up unemployed because of his government's failures?
Well, can I say to the right honourable lady, there's no shortage of hot air on that side of the benches. The Business Secretary has been absolutely crystal clear. We're seeing the challenge of wholesale gas prices rise all over the world. We will maintain supply this year. The Business Secretary has taken targeted action to support the 2 critical CO2 plants to make sure that not only do we see energy supplies through, but also food distribution. The reality is, for all her cheap political barbs, they have got no plan on that side of the House. If we'd have listened to the Labour Party, we wouldn't have opened up, we wouldn't be bouncing back, jobs wouldn't be rising and wages wouldn't be rising.
Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, maybe he should go back to his sun lounger and let me take over. Because the truth is, Mr. Speaker, they were warned about the problems that we faced and the energy crisis that we faced. And there we have it, absolutely nothing to help the people up and down the country who are working themselves to the ground and still struggling to make ends meet. This is a Conservative party that does not care about working people. Families, Mr. Speaker, across the country are worried about heating their homes while he's complaining about having to share his 115-room taxpayer-funded mansion with the Foreign Secretary. Just as, Mr. Speaker, just as the truth hurts, doesn't it? Just as his government are making choices that are making working families' lives harder. A typical family, Mr. Speaker, are facing a tough winter this year. Universal credit down £1,000, rent up £150, gas bills up £150, taxes up and food prices are soaring. Working people will have to choose whether to feed their kids or heat their homes. The choice for the Deputy Prime Minister is, will he make their lives easier or harder? So what will he choose, Mr. Speaker? Will the government cancel the universal credit cut?
Can I say to the right honourable lady, she should check her facts, because Chevening is funded via a charity, not a penny of taxpayers' money. Let me also tell her the most disastrous thing for energy bills of hard-working people across this country would be to follow Labour's plan to nationalise the energy companies, which the CBI say would cost as much as £2,000 on bills. Mr. Speaker, this government's the one taking action to take the country forward with a plan for the NHS, a plan for COVID, and our plan is working. Employment up, job vacancies up, wages up. If we'd have listened to the party opposite, we would never have come out of lockdown. We're the ones taking the difficult decisions, getting on with the job, and our plan is working.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, members of the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme from across this House attended our excellent Defence Academy. And what is striking is the number of services personnel from overseas who come to the UK to benefit from its world-class professional defence and security education. So does my right honourable friend agree with me that this is a further illustration that, far from being a fifth wheel on the carriage, the UK is at the heart of ensuring global security, that the AUKUS Pact is one of the best ways to meet emerging threats, particularly in the South China Sea?
My honourable friend is absolutely bang on. The AUKUS partnership is incredibly important for our security. It builds on what we said in the integrated review about promoting stability in the Indo-Pacific. It builds on our FTA negotiations, including CPTPP. It builds on our membership as a dialogue partner of ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the first new member in over 20 years, and it will have huge opportunities for jobs and businesses here at home, and part of the levelling up agenda.
Deputy Leader of the SNP, Kirsty Oswald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Across Scotland and the UK, millions of families are seeing their incomes slashed by this Tory government, with a toxic combination of Tory cuts, tax rises and the growing cost of Brexit. The Prime Minister promised that he would make energy bills more than £60 per household cheaper after Brexit. Instead, they could skyrocket by £550 at the worst possible time. The UK government is slashing universal credit by £1,040, furlough is ending prematurely, and a Tory tax hike will leave the majority of families hundreds of pounds worse off next year. Right. Let's be clear, this is a Tory cost of living crisis, and yet again lower and middle income families will suffer the most. So will the Deputy Prime Minister agree with me it is time to scrap Tory cuts to universal credit and to introduce an emergency energy payment for lower income families, so no one has to choose between heating and eating this winter?
Can I just say to the Honourable Lady, many of those issues are devolved to Scotland, but the price gap, the energy price gap will save 15 million households up to £100 each year. We're also taking targeted measures to extend the warm home discount. That will be £150 knocked off the bills of 780,000 homes. We're providing seasonal cold weather payments to eligible claimants, an extra £25 a week during colder periods. On top of that, we're giving a winter fuel payment to recipients of the state pension. But the crucial thing, Mr. Speaker, is that we've got rising employment and rising wages, and that will benefit everyone in Scotland and across the UK.
Kirstin Oswald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And that's a disappointing and perplexing response from the Deputy Prime Minister, who perhaps needs to go back and look again. And I have to say to him, warm words don't heat homes. And unless these Tory cuts are reversed, we will see even more families pushed into hardship and crisis. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I met with the East Renfrewshire Citizens Advice Bureau. They warned of a cost of living tsunami hammering families. A universal credit cut, Tory tax hikes, soaring household bills. Because of this government's choices, people are having to choose between heating their homes or feeding their families. For all their empty rhetoric, you can't level up by making people poorer. So can the Deputy Prime Minister explain why he's stubbornly refusing to consider introducing an emergency energy payment that would help families through a very difficult winter?
Well, as said, Mr. Speaker, the price cap in place will save 50 million households up to £100 each year. On top of that, because of the approach we've taken with the national living wage, full-time workers will be £4,000 per year better off. But can I just also say to her, I think given the challenges that we understandably face, people expect, including in Scotland, for us to come together, stop this scaremongering, stop this sowing of division, and that's why I would have thought she would welcome the fact, with some of the challenges that the Scottish Ambulance Service is facing, that we've got the British Armed Forces helping the people of Scotland.
Chris Loader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bus and train operator First Group continue to slash our transport services in West Dorset, despite receiving millions of pounds of public money with no revenue risk at all, and the worst rail line frequency in the country on the Heart of Wessex line. Will the Deputy Prime Minister directly intervene to save what little service we have on that 3-hourly frequency line, or will he actively work to get a new operator that will?
Can I thank my honourable friend, and I know he's a great champion for the people in his constituency. I also understand that the Department for Transport has been engaging with the transport operators in his constituency. I understand that South Western Rail intend to increase service levels to their pre-COVID timetable by May 2022, and I also know that they have ambitions for an increase in the train service frequency on the Great Western Rail route. DfT will of course continue to work with GWR, and I continue to support him in trying to champion commuters and passengers on all of those services.
Stephen Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Without a Green New Deal, the government is struggling to meet its carbon reduction targets under the Paris Agreement. At the same time, the International Energy Agency is making clear there shouldn't be any new exploitation of oil or gas fields if the world is to meet the 2050 target for carbon neutrality. Yet, the government is potentially investing in the new Cambo oil field in the North Sea, and also supporting other oil wells across the UK. So how can the government have any credibility when it said and made a pledge to cease funding oil and gas companies, yet this is still going ahead?
Well, can I say to the honourable gentleman, thank him for his question. Of course, we launched the landmark North Sea transition deal to transform the offshore oil and gas sector in preparation for net zero, so we have a plan. We've also secured record investment in wind power, totalling close to £500 million. We've got a world-leading hydrogen strategy, and of course we're the first major economy in the world to set net zero into law. And I can tell the honourable gentleman that on Monday at the UN General Assembly, the Prime Minister announced £550 million of ODA that will be allocated to support developing countries to meet net zero. We're leading by example at home and abroad.
Andy Carter.
Mr. Speaker, as you know, Warrington is one of the fastest growing towns in the north of England. But our hospital, which is mostly Victorian, is creaking at the seams. Over the last year, the hospital have recruited an additional 240 new nurses and more than 100 doctors. But we need more beds. So can I ask the Deputy Prime Minister to speak to the Health Secretary and ask him to back our bid for a new hospital in Warrington?
Can I thank my honourable friend? He's a powerful champion for patients and his constituents. We've now received applications for to be one of the next 8 hospitals in our new hospital programme. I understand that an expression of interest has been submitted by proposing developments across both the Warrington and Halton Hospital. I can't, and he'll understand, notwithstanding the smart way that he's gone about his intervention, I can't comment on particular applications, but I can tell him there'll be a decision by the spring of 2022.
Deirdre Brock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I start, Mr. Speaker, as our Westminster COP26 spokesperson, by welcoming today's announcement by INEOS of £1 billion of investment into cutting greenhouse gas emissions at its Grangemouth plant and supporting the CCUS Acorn cluster at St Fergus in Aberdeenshire. A big step in the right direction. But now I must ask the Deputy Prime Minister this. Can he outline exactly for us what it is his government has against the Scottish Government requiring real living wages for Scottish workers and net zero obligations in its green ports?
Well, can I just say to the honourable lady, net zero is at the heart of everything we do, and we've raised the national living wage, which will save the full-time worker £400 every year.
John Penrose.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, later today the Subsidy Control Bill will give us all a welcome chance to replace clunky and bureaucratic EU-derived laws with faster, simpler and more flexible UK rules instead. But would the Deputy Prime Minister agree with me that subsidies need strong controls so they aren't misused by, heaven forbid, a future Labour government? Ministers have already committed to make the UK world leader in subsidy transparency. So will he look carefully at proposals to publish details of more subsidies in future rather than fewer, as the current bill suggests?
Can I thank my honourable friend? He'll know, of course, that today the House will be discussing our landmark subsidy control bill, which will allow us to seize the opportunities having left the EU. Our new control system will provide quicker and more flexible support to British businesses, but he's right with what he said about transparency, and decisions on subsidies that were previously subject to approval by unelected EU bureaucrats will now be decided subject to the scrutiny and the rigour of honourable members on both sides across this House, and that will give us the transparency but also the accountability that he wants.
Bernie Sherman.
Mr. Speaker, I've known the honourable gentleman for some time and always got on quite well with him. He represents one of the wealthiest constituencies in the country. Can you assure me that he still believes in the redistribution of income in our country? Does he really believe in levelling up? And if he does, will he make sure that Channel 4 stays in Leeds, stays in the public sector, because it's essential in the growth of our tech economy in the north of England?
Mr. Speaker, we put the UK Infrastructure Bank in Leeds because we love Leeds. And can I just say, he asks about inequality and levelling up. The levelling up agenda will, of course, help those in the Midlands, those in the North, but it will also help those in London and the South East by easing the pressure on the economy, by easing the pressure on tax revenues, and by easing the pressure on planning.
Chris Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government says that to protect the most vulnerable, it is compelling care workers to be vaccinated against COVID-19, even though this is expected to force out 40,000 carers who have been on the front line throughout the pandemic. Would my right honourable friend set out why the same approach isn't being taken to protect the most vulnerable in the National Health Service?
Can I thank my honourable friend? Look, we're very clear. Vaccines are saving lives. They're also boosting the economy because they've allowed us to open up. That's particularly important for the risk to vulnerable people, including carers in care homes. Over 90% of care home staff have received their first dose ahead of the November deadline. We encourage others to get vaccinated, and of course the DHSC is currently considering whether to make vaccination of not just COVID but also flu a condition of deployment for frontline workers in health but also in care settings.
Tricia Gibson.
Employers' national insurance payments
will place a huge burden on the public sector, from local government to police and fire services. Can the Deputy Prime Minister tell the House what the financial impact of this will be, both north and south of the border, and if additional funding will be provided to ensure there are no cuts to our vital public services?
Well, can I just say to the Honourable Lady that, of course, the Treasury assessed very carefully these measures. We're supporting hundreds of thousands of jobs for young people under our Kickstart scheme. There's a range of other measures that we're taking, including the Restart scheme, and of course we look at the tax burden. But I would just remind her that we're the ones that have taken 1,200. We're the ones that have saved the average worker £1,200 every year. We've doubled the free childcare for working parents, and frankly, to the Honourable Lady, we're of course mindful of the pressure on public service, as with the private sector. We're doing everything we can. But the SNP opposed coming out of lockdown. The SNP opposed.
Order! Please, we've got to try and get through some questions. It's your own side. You're stopping asking the questions, Deputy Prime Minister. Too long an answer. Deanna Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Much of the reason that I stand in this chamber today follows a chain reaction of events following the death of my father from a single punch assault. But my dad is just one of many victims, which is why this week we are marking One Punch Awareness Week. So can I ask the Deputy Prime Minister if he'll join me in showing his support for One Punch Awareness Week, and can I extend an invitation to him to join me immediately after PMQs in Westminster Hall, and indeed all colleagues right across the House to join us to show that support?
Can I say to my honourable friend, I know how much this campaign means to her personally. I know that honourable members across the House will be very proud of the tenacious way she is pursuing that campaign. Of course I will join her in Westminster Hall, and I would encourage all honourable members to do the same.
Lock up.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following the ill-informed and partisan comments from President Biden overnight, would the Deputy Prime Minister urge the Prime Minister to point out to those he meets in the US who actually care about political stability in Northern Ireland that far from defending the Belfast Agreement, the Northern Ireland Protocol is now the single greatest danger to the political institutions? Mr. Speaker, the situation is now time critical. Does the Deputy Prime Minister agree with me that a solution that restores Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom's internal markets is the only way to avert the collapse of the institutions, and such a solution must be found in weeks rather than months?
Can I thank the Honourable Lady? We absolutely agree that having a smart and pragmatic approach is the only way that we will be able to uphold the Good Friday Agreement for all communities in Northern Ireland. And notwithstanding what the reporting has said, I know, having been in Carbis Bay with the Prime Minister and with the President, that he understands our view, and we've explained our position, as well as them taking into account what the EU has said.
Jesse Norman.
Mr. Speaker, the House will know that the River Wye is one of the most beautiful rivers in our country and also a priceless national asset, yet it is being threatened by phosphate pollution. Will my right honourable friend press colleagues in the government and in number 10 to work with us to push the agencies and other interested bodies to a long-term integrated plan to clean up the River Wye?
Can I thank my honourable friend? Of course, the government understands, and he champions eloquently the importance of the River Wye. We'll do everything we can to support him with preserving it for future generations.
Margaret Farrier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With less than 100 days until Christmas, many of our constituents will be choosing to shop for children's toys online. There have unfortunately been incidents of young children swallowing small parts like batteries and magnets, which require invasive medical intervention. With rogue traders out there, Deputy Prime Minister, how can consumers be satisfied that toys they purchase via online marketplaces are safe, marked as age appropriate and meet the required safety standards?
Can I thank the Honourable Lady? And I've got young children, and I know what it's like at Christmas, and as well as being a time of great happiness, also a certain degree of trepidation when they go for the presents in the way she described. But I can reassure her, manufacturers and distributors must provide information on age-appropriate use of toys. The UK Office for Product Safety and Standards will take action to remove products online that pose any risk, and our product safety framework is being reviewed to make sure that it's fit for purpose, that it's updated in line with new products going onto the market, and above all, that it protects consumers.
Jonathan Gullis.
Thank you very much. Stoke-on-Trent has received so far £29 million to the Transforming Cities Fund, 550 jobs from the Home Office, and Kids Growth has received a £17.6 million town deal. After 70 years of neglect from the Labour Party, Stoke-on-Trent is firmly on the map, but we have a £73.5 million Levelling Up Fund bid. So will my right honourable friend ensure that Stoke-on-Trent, who is now hungry, gets its just dessert?
He's a Doughty champion for his constituency. He's absolutely right. We'll give him all the support we can. And he's right to say the only reason that we're seeing that level of prosperity is because we've got employment rising, youth unemployment coming up, and rising wages. That's happening under this government because the opposition have no plan whatsoever.
But it's nice to welcome back Sir George Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I take this opportunity to thank you personally for the kindness you showed during my recent illness. Does the right honourable gentleman agree that town halls know better than Whitehall when it comes to levelling up? And will he pass on my suggestion to the Prime Minister that he hosts a cross-party summit in Downing Street with local government leaders and mayors to discuss how they can be empowered to unlock that potential?
Can I thank the honourable gentleman? Whatever our differences, it's fantastic to see him back in the chamber, contributing, holding the government to account. I think the agenda for levelling up has got to involve a team effort, central government, local authorities and the many metro mayors across the country. So I support the spirit of what he said, and we'll do everything we can to work with him.
Siobhan Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Stroud, the Nailsworth Climate Area Action Network held a well-attended retrofit fair to help people learn about the benefits of insulating homes and the options available. Will my right honourable friend congratulate the group on the constructive approach to this difficult issue and provide the House with the confidence that the government is making even more creating even more solutions for energy-efficient homes, and let us know when there'll be more details of that work?
Can I thank my honourable friend, support all of the efforts at the local level that she's pursuing. We're backing that up at the national level, requiring all new build homes by 2025 to have low carbon heating and world-leading levels of energy efficiency. That's on top of the investment, the record investment in wind power, on top of being producing a world-leading hydrogen strategy, and also bringing the world together, because it's going to require an international solution at the COP26 Global Climate Summit in November.
Rachel Hopkins.
Mr. Speaker, 239 jobs at the Vauxhall plant in Luton South are at risk this week due to the semiconductor chip shortage and furlough ending this month. The government has failed to safeguard jobs, failed to maintain key strategic supply lines and failed to support the UK's capability in areas such as silicon. So will the Deputy Prime Minister outline to me what Number 10 is going to do to ensure the UK automotive sector remains competitive globally and skilled jobs in towns like mine, Luton, are saved?
Can I say to the honourable lady, I don't think it's quite right to say the government hasn't been supporting workers. We paid the wages of nearly 12 million workers throughout this pandemic. Clearly that can't continue indefinitely, but I can reassure her specifically that the government is investing in supporting gigafactories, and we will be investing in the technologies of the future that will create the jobs of the future in her constituency and right across the UK.
Derek Thomas.
All of us here enjoy the opportunity to eat British food and drink and enjoy British flowers. I'm joined by all of Cornwall's MPs pressing the Home Secretary to renew the seasonal agricultural worker scheme for next year, 30,000 people, but also to allow them to pick daffodils. Will the Deputy Prime Minister please speak to the Home Secretary to remind her of the urgency of getting the seasonal agricultural worker scheme renewed? Thank you.
My honourable friend is a powerful champion for his constituency in the region. I will, of course, pass on his suggestion and advice to the Home Secretary. I believe she's been lobbied from various other quarters. We're very mindful of the impact on seasonal workers, and we'll make sure we get the right balance.
Final question, Anna McMorran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A former junior minister for Courts and Justice once told this House he was absolutely committed to doing everything he could to improve the treatment of victims in the justice system. 6 years and 3 manifesto commitments later, we're still waiting for them to deliver a promised victims bill. That junior minister is now the 6th Justice Secretary. So will he commit here today to delivering that long overdue victims bill and bring justice to millions of victims across the country, including my own constituent who was left homeless, jobless and traumatised through the court system?
Can I thank the Honourable Lady? I can absolutely make that commitment. I can tell her on day one I looked at the plans and expedited the work that we're doing on it. Well, if she'd give me a chance, I've not been in the job a full week. But what I can also tell her, what we're doing right now with the victims, the Women and Girls Victim Strategy that we published in July, we've provided a national police lead that reports directly to the Home Secretary. We've invested 30 million in making streets safer at night, particularly important for women, so that they have that reassurance they need, that there are no-go areas, that there are no de facto curfews. And we've also introduced 24/7 rape and sexual assault helplines. Can I just also gently say to her that in terms of standing up for the victims of crime, I lament the fact that the Labour Party voted against our police crime sentencing courts bill requiring all violent offenders, all rapists, all child rapists to serve at least 2/3 of the sentence behind bars. You can't stand up for victims unless you stand up for tough sentencing.
Right, that is the end of questions. I'll let people leave before I just read out.